They didn't laugh all at once. It started in pieces, scattered and uncertain, like people testing the weight of something they weren't sure they believed in yet. By the time the sound gathered into something louder, something sharper, she was already standing in the center of the street with nowhere left to turn. Her name was Marin Hale, and she had lived in that town long enough to know every face in the crowd, long enough to recognize the way people avoided her eyes now, the way they chose distance over truth. The dust clung to her dress as if even the ground wanted to claim her, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, her breath shallow and uneven. Someone had pushed her forward earlier, not hard, not enough to leave a mark anyone could point to, but enough to make it clear she didn't belong anywhere else. "Go on," a voice had said, low and amused, and the crowd had shifted, forming a loose circle that tightened with every second she stood there. She tried to speak at first, tried to explain, but her voice didn't carry the way it should have. It broke apart before it reached anyone willing to hear it. A man near the front shook his head slowly, as if disappointed, though his eyes never left her face. Another leaned back against a post, arms crossed, watching like this was something meant for him to enjoy. The sheriff stood just outside the circle, not stepping in, not stepping away, his silence louder than anything else in the street. Marin's fingers curled slightly, gripping the fabric of her dress as if it might hold her together, as if it might keep the moment from unraveling completely. "I didn't do anything," she said again, but it sounded smaller now, weaker, like even the words were losing their place in the world. The laughter came again, louder this time, more certain, and it settled over her, like a weight she couldn't shake. No one stopped it, no one questioned it. The town watched, and that watching became its own kind of action. The sun sat high above them, unforgiving, casting hard shadows that made everything feel sharper than it should have been. Marin swayed slightly where she stood, the heat pressing down on her, her vision blurring at the edges as the noise around her grew distant, like it was happening somewhere else entirely. A man stepped closer, just enough to invade her space without touching her, his presence deliberate, controlled. "You should have thought about that before," he said, though it wasn't clear what that was anymore. The accusation had grown beyond its origin, fed by whispers and assumptions, until it no longer needed proof. Marin's eyes moved across the crowd again, searching, hoping to find something, someone who would break away from it, who would see her as something more than what they had decided she was. But every face she met turned away or hardened further, each one reinforcing the same quiet decision. Not me, not now, not worth it. She felt her knees weaken, her body leaning slightly as if it were trying to escape the center of that circle, but there was nowhere to go. The ground beneath her seemed to tilt, the heat and the shame twisting together until it was hard to separate one from the other. A bottle rolled somewhere nearby, its hollow sound echoing louder than it should have, drawing a brief flicker of attention before the focus returned to her. Always her. "Say it again," someone called out, and the laughter followed, sharp and cutting. Marin swallowed, her throat dry, her voice barely holding together. "I didn't," she started, but the words caught, broke, and fell away before they could become anything more. The moment stretched, tightening around her, threatening to close completely. And then, just as it reached its breaking point, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to be felt. A presence at the edge of the circle, a stillness that didn't belong to the noise around it. He didn't step forward right away. He stood there, just beyond the reach of the crowd, his hat low, his expression unreadable from where she stood. The first thing anyone noticed about him was what he didn't do. He didn't laugh, didn't whisper, didn't look away. He simply watched, and that watching was different from the rest. It carried weight, it carried judgment. One by one, a few heads turned toward him, curiosity flickering where certainty had been moments before. Marin's eyes found him slowly, drawn by something she couldn't explain, something that felt like the absence of everything else. He didn't move closer, but the space around him seemed to shift anyway, the edge of the circle loosening just enough to let him exist within it without being part of it. The man near Marin noticed it too, his posture tightening slightly as his attention flicked toward the stranger. You got something to say? He asked, his tone sharper now, less certain. The stranger remained still for a moment longer, as if measuring the distance between what was happening and what should have been. Then, finally, he stepped forward. Just one step. It was enough. The crowd didn't part, not completely, but it adjusted, the same way people do when they sense something they don't understand but don't want to stand in the way of. He moved through them without forcing it, his presence quiet but undeniable, until he stood just off to the side of Marin. Not too close, not too far. For a second, he said nothing. The silence that followed was different from the one before. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and clear enough to cut through the heat and the noise without raising itself above either. That's enough. The words didn't echo, didn't demand attention, but they took it anyway. The laughter stopped, not all at once, not completely, but enough to break the rhythm that had held the moment together. The man closest to Marin let out a short breath, as if deciding whether to push back or step aside. "This ain't your concern," he said, though the confidence in his voice had thinned. The gunslinger's gaze shifted to him, calm and unwavering. "It is now," he replied, just as quietly. There was no threat in it, no anger, just a certainty that didn't need to prove itself. Around them, the crowd shifted again, the same people who had stood firm moments ago now exchanging uncertain glances, their silence no longer aligned. Marin felt it before she understood it, the weight lifting, not completely, but enough to breathe. The man hesitated, his stance faltering just slightly, and that was all it took. The moment broke. Someone at the edge of the circle stepped back. Another looked down. The sheriff shifted his position, as if remembering he was supposed to act, but finding no clear way to do it. The gunslinger didn't move closer. He didn't need to. He had already changed the balance. Marin's shoulders lowered, her breath coming easier now, her body no longer braced for what might come next. She looked at him, really looked this time, and found nothing dramatic in his expression, just the absence of everything that had been forced on her moments before: respect, quiet and simple. He gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, and then he stepped back, as if the space he had created was now hers to stand in. The crowd began to disperse slowly, the noise fading into something quieter, something uncertain. And as the circle dissolved around her, Marin realized something that would stay with her long after the dust settled, that it had only taken one voice, spoken at the right moment, to undo what an entire town had allowed.